The sound of gunshots echoed through the cold Montana night as Willow Matthews clutched her twin babies to her chest and ran, her breath creating small clouds in the air as she fled from the only home she had ever known. It was 1876, and at 22 years old, she was choosing freedom over safety, even if that freedom came with uncertainty and danger. Willow's legs burned as she stumbled through the darkness, the weight of 6-month-old Emma and Elijah making her arms ache. She'd wrapped them tightly in woolen blankets to shield them from the autumn chill, but their tiny faces were still cold against her neck. Behind her, she could hear her father's angry shouts growing more distant. He'd fired his shotgun into the air when he discovered her sneaking away, but he hadn't given chase, at least not yet. By dawn, she knew, he would round up his farmhands and come looking for her. "Just a little farther," she whispered to the babies who, miraculously, remained quiet despite the jostling journey. "We'll find somewhere safe." She had no plan beyond reaching the small creek that marked the boundary between her father's property and the neighboring cattle ranch. After that, she would head west toward the town of Silver Creek, almost 15 miles away. It was impossible to reach in a single night on foot with 2 infants, but she had to try. The twins weren't even hers by birth. They belonged to her sister Martha, who had died in childbirth 6 months ago. Martha's husband had abandoned her when he learned she was carrying twins, and Willow's father had reluctantly allowed his unmarried daughter to stay at the farm. But in recent weeks, he'd begun negotiations with Harold Pinkerton, a widower 30 years Willow's senior who owned the adjacent farm. The arrangement was simple. Willow would marry Pinkerton, and the babies would be sent to an orphanage in Helena. "I'd rather die than let that happen," Willow had told Martha's grave the previous morning. By nightfall, she had made her decision. Her foot caught on an exposed root and she went down hard, twisting her body to protect the babies. Emma began to cry, a sound that tore at Willow's heart and filled her with terror. If anyone from the farm heard, they would come running. "Shh, sweet girl," she murmured, struggling to her feet. "We must be quiet now." The creek was just ahead. She could hear the gentle sound of water flowing over rocks. Just a little farther and they would be off her father's land. Not that it would stop him. Abraham Matthews believed he owned not just his property but everything and everyone on it, especially his daughters. Willow splashed across the shallow creek, the icy water soaking her boots and the hem of her dress. On the other side, she paused to catch her breath, leaning against a tree. Both babies were whimpering now, hungry and uncomfortable. "We'll rest soon," she promised, though she knew she couldn't stop for long. Dawn was still hours away, but she needed to put as much distance as possible between herself and the farm. She had been walking for perhaps another hour when she heard the sound of hooves. Her heart leaped into her throat as she darted behind a large boulder, crouching low and holding the babies close. The twins, sensing her fear, fell silent. The rider approached slowly, the sound of the horse's steps deliberate. Willow held her breath, praying the babies wouldn't cry out. Then the rider stopped, and a man's voice called softly into the darkness. "I know someone's out here. I saw you cross the creek on my property. Show yourself, and I promise no harm will come to you." Willow remained frozen in place. The voice didn't sound like any of her father's men, but that didn't mean she could trust it. "Look," the voice continued, "it's near freezing out here. If you've got young ones with you, as I suspect from those tracks, they'll catch their death. I've got a warm cabin not far from here." Emma let out a cry then, a pitiful sound that no mother could ignore. Willow stood slowly, emerging from behind the boulder with both babies clutched to her chest. The rider was a tall figure atop a dark horse, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. As he dismounted, Willow tensed, ready to run despite knowing she wouldn't get far. "Name's Kieran Walsh," the man said, approaching cautiously as if she were a spooked animal. "I run the Double W ranch you're standing on." In the faint moonlight, she could see he was younger than she'd expected, perhaps in his late 20s or early 30s. His face was weathered from the sun but kind, with a strong jaw and eyes that looked at her with concern rather than judgment. "I'm Willow Matthews," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "These are my sister's children, Emma and Elijah." Kieran nodded, taking in her torn dress, mud-splattered legs, and the exhausted determination in her eyes. "Matthews, you Abraham's daughter," Willow stiffened. "You know my father." "Everyone within 50 miles knows Abraham Matthews," Kieran replied grimly. "None too fondly, I might add." He glanced at the babies and then back at the direction from which she'd come. "I take it you're running from him." When Willow didn't answer, Kieran sighed. "You can't stay out here, Miss Matthews. My ranch house is about a mile west. You and those little ones need warmth and food." "I can't," Willow said. "If my father comes looking, Abraham Matthews doesn't set foot on my land," Kieran interrupted, his voice hard. "There's no love lost between us. Besides, you're free now. You crossed the boundary. He has no claim on you or those children." "Free," Willow repeated the word as if tasting it for the first time. Kieran's expression softened. "Yes, madam, free, and you can stay as long as you need to." Something in his steady gaze made Willow believe him. Or perhaps it was simply that she had no choice. The babies were hungry, and she was exhausted beyond measure. "Thank you," she said quietly. Kieran nodded, then removed his coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The warmth of the wool and the lingering scent of tobacco and leather enveloped her like a promise. "Can you ride?" he asked, gesturing to his horse. "Yes, but with the babies, I'll walk alongside and lead Mercy here," he said, patting the mare's neck. "It's not far." He helped her mount, arranging his coat around both her and the babies. As they set off toward the ranch house, Willow felt a strange mix of terror and hope. She had no idea what awaited her, but for the first time in her life, she was making her own choice. The ranch house appeared over a small rise, a solid structure built of logs with light glowing from 2 windows. As they approached, Willow could see it was larger than she'd expected, with a wide porch and a stone chimney from which smoke curled against the night sky. "It's not much," Kieran said, misreading her silence for disappointment, "but it's warm and dry." "It's beautiful," Willow replied honestly. Compared to the cramped room she'd shared with the twins in her father's farmhouse, Kieran's home looked like a palace. He helped her dismount, taking one of the babies so she could climb down safely. The feel of his strong hands at her waist sent an unexpected flutter through her stomach, something she quickly attributed to exhaustion and relief. Inside, the house was simply furnished but clean and welcoming. A fire crackled in the hearth, and a large wooden table dominated the main room. Through a doorway, Willow glimpsed a kitchen, and stairs led to what she assumed were bedrooms above. "My housekeeper, Mrs. Flores, lives in the small cabin out back with her husband, who works as my foreman," Kieran explained. "They're good people. They'll help with the babies if needed." He guided her to a chair near the fire. "Are you hungry? There's stew keeping warm on the stove." Willow nodded gratefully. "The babies need to be fed first. I have some milk in my bag, but it won't last long." "Mrs. Flores keeps goats. We can get fresh milk in the morning," Kieran said. "For now, let's see what we can do for these little ones." With surprising gentleness for a man his size, Kieran helped Willow unwrap the babies and settle them on a blanket spread before the fire. Emma and Elijah, warm at last, cooed and kicked their legs. "They're beautiful," Kieran said softly. "How old?" 6 months. "My sister died bringing them into the world," Willow's voice caught. Their father left before they were born. Kieran's jaw tightened. Some men don't deserve the title of father. There was something in his tone that made Willow look at him sharply. You speak from experience. My own father wasn't much to speak of, Kieran admitted. Left my mother and me when I was 5. She worked herself to death in a laundry back east. He smiled ruefully. But that's ancient history now. He moved to the kitchen and returned with a bowl of stew and a chunk of bread. Eat, he urged. I'll hold the little one while you feed the other. Willow hesitated, then handed Elijah to him. The rancher cradled the baby with surprising skill. You've held babies before, she observed. My ranch hands have families, Kieran explained. I'm godfather to 3 little ones already. As Willow fed Emma and then herself, Kieran entertained Elijah, speaking to him in a low, gentle voice that made the baby stare in fascination. When both babies were fed and changed, using the clean clothes Willow had managed to pack, they began to drift off to sleep. I've got a spare room upstairs, Kieran said. It's small, but there's a bed that should fit you and the twins. Mr. Walsh, I don't know how to thank you, Willow began. Kieran, he corrected. And there's no need for thanks. Anyone would do the same. But Willow knew that wasn't true. Few men would welcome a strange woman and 2 babies into their home in the middle of the night, especially when they might bring trouble. The spare room was simply furnished with a bed, a small dresser, and a rocking chair by the window. Kieran lit a lamp and stepped back. The washroom is down the hall. There's water in the pitcher if you want to freshen up. This is more than I could have hoped for, Willow said, settling the sleeping babies in the center of the bed. Kieran nodded. Get some rest. We can talk more in the morning. When he had gone, Willow sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the magnitude of what she had done. She had run away, taking 2 babies with her. Her father would be furious. He would come looking for her, of that she was certain, but for tonight at least they were safe. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight they were warm, fed, and sheltered by the unexpected kindness of a stranger. Willow woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of a woman's voice singing softly in Spanish. For a moment she was disoriented, then the events of the previous night came rushing back. She sat up quickly, checking on the twins, who were still sleeping peacefully beside her. The door opened slightly, and a middle-aged woman with silver-streaked black hair peeked in. Ah, you are awake, señorita. I am Rosa Flores. Mr. Walsh asked me to check on you and the little ones. Thank you, Mrs. Flores. I'm Willow Matthews. Rosa entered fully, carrying a tray with coffee and what smelled like freshly baked bread. Mr. Walsh told me about your journey. You are very brave, señorita. Willow accepted the coffee gratefully. Not brave, desperate. Rosa's dark eyes softened with understanding. Sometimes they are the same thing. Now drink your coffee. I have brought fresh clothes for you. They belonged to my daughter before she married and moved to Denver. They may be a little short, but they are clean. You're very kind, Willow said, touched by the woman's generosity. And when you are ready, Mr. Walsh wishes to speak with you. He is in the barn, tending to the horses. After washing and changing into the simple but well-made dress Rosa had provided, Willow fed and changed the twins. Rosa offered to watch them while Willow spoke with Kieran, assuring her that she had raised 5 children of her own and knew how to handle babies. I won't be long, Willow promised, kissing each baby's forehead before reluctantly leaving them in Rosa's capable hands. She found Kieran in the barn, just as Rosa had said. He was brushing down a magnificent black stallion, his sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms tanned by the sun. He looked up as she entered, his face breaking into a warm smile that made her heart skip. Good morning, he said. I hope you slept well. Better than I have in months, Willow admitted. Thank you again for your hospitality. Kieran set down the brush and leaned against the stall door. I thought we might talk about what happens next. Willow's stomach tightened. You want us to leave? No, Kieran said quickly. That's not it at all. You're welcome to stay as long as you need, but I thought we should discuss your father. Willow wrapped her arms around herself. He'll come looking for me. I expect he will, Kieran agreed, and I want you to know that you're safe here. Abraham Matthews and I have had our differences over the years. He won't set foot on my property, and if he sends his men, they'll find themselves unwelcome. What did my father do to you? Willow asked, curious about the edge in his voice when he spoke of Abraham. Kieran's jaw tightened. Your father tried to claim water rights to the creek that runs between our properties. When the county ruled in my favor, he poisoned part of my herd out of spite. I could never prove it was him, but 3 of my best breeding cattle died. Willow closed her eyes, sick with shame. That sounds like him. I'm sorry. You're not responsible for your father's actions, Kieran said firmly, but you should know the kind of man he is before you decide what to do next. I know exactly what kind of man he is, Willow replied, a hardness entering her voice. I lived under his roof for 22 years. I watched him drive my mother to an early grave with his cruelty. I saw him disown my sister when she fell pregnant out of wedlock, and I heard him arrange my marriage to a man who wanted a young wife to bear him sons and a housekeeper to tend his home. Kieran's expression darkened. Pinkerton. Willow looked at him in surprise. You know, everyone in the county knows Harold Pinkerton worked his last wife to death, Kieran said grimly, and now he thinks he can do the same to you. He won't get the chance, Willow said. I'll take the twins and move on as soon as I can, perhaps to California. I hear there are opportunities there for women on their own. Kieran was quiet for a moment, brushing his hand along the stallion's neck. Or you could stay here. Willow stared at him. Here, at your ranch, Mrs. Flores could use help with the house. It's getting to be too much for her, though she'd never admit it, and I could use someone to keep the books. My foreman, Miguel, tries his best, but numbers aren't his strong suit. You're offering me employment? Willow asked, stunned by the unexpected proposal. Kieran nodded. With room and board for you and the twins. It wouldn't be much in the way of wages at first, but yes, Willow interrupted. Yes, I accept, thank you. Kieran looked pleased but also a little surprised at her quick acceptance. You should know that it won't be easy. Life on a ranch is hard work, and your father, my father, is the past, Willow said firmly. Emma and Elijah are my future, and I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Walsh. Kieran, he corrected again, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Kieran, she repeated, feeling a strange warmth spread through her at the informality. Just then, Miguel Flores appeared at the barn entrance, his expression grave. Riders coming, Chief, 6 of them. Matthews' men by the look of it. Kieran's face hardened. Sooner than I expected. He turned to Willow. Go back to the house. Stay with Mrs. Flores and the babies. Lock the door. But please, Willow, let me handle this. Something in his voice made her obey, though every instinct screamed at her to stay. As she hurried back to the house, she could hear the approaching riders, and fear knotted in her stomach. Her father would not give up easily. From the window of the front room, Willow watched as Kieran strode out to meet the riders, Miguel flanking him with a rifle held casually but visibly in his hands. 2 other ranch hands appeared from the bunkhouse, similarly armed. At the head of the approaching group rode not her father but Jeb Talbert, her father's foreman. Beside him was Harold Pinkerton himself, his thin face set in a mask of righteous indignation. They cannot take you, Rosa said quietly, coming to stand beside Willow with Elijah in her arms. Emma was asleep in a makeshift cradle by the fire. Mr. Walsh will not allow it. My father doesn't recognize that I have the right to make my own choices, Willow said, watching as the men dismounted and confronted Kieran. She couldn't hear what was being said, but she could see Kieran's stance, legs planted firmly, arms crossed over his chest, chin raised in defiance. Harold Pinkerton jabbed a finger at the house, his face reddening as he shouted something that made Kieran step forward, forcing Pinkerton to back up. Jeb Talbot put a hand on his gun, but Miguel raised his rifle slightly, and Talbot thought better of it. After what seemed like an eternity, the Matthews men remounted their horses. Pinkerton lingered, saying something else to Kieran that made the rancher's hands clench into fists. Then they rode away, dust rising behind them as they galloped back toward the Matthews farm. Willow let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. They're leaving. For now, Rosa said pragmatically, but they will be back. Men like that do not give up easily. Kieran entered the house a few minutes later, his expression thunderous. When he saw Willow, however, his face softened. They're gone. What did they say? Kieran ran a hand through his hair. Your father claims you've stolen his property, meaning the babies, and that you're to return immediately to fulfill your obligations. And Harold Pinkerton? Willow asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He says you're promised to him, that there's a contract. There is, Willow admitted. My father made me sign it, but I was coerced. Surely that counts for something. It might, if we had a judge who wasn't in your father's pocket, Kieran said grimly. But that doesn't matter. You're on my land now, under my protection. They can't force you to go back. Willow looked at him uncertainly. I don't want to bring trouble to your door. Trouble and I are old acquaintances, Kieran said with a wry smile. Besides, you heard me offer you a job. You accepted. As far as I'm concerned, that makes you an employee of the Double W Ranch, and I take care of my people. The matter-of-fact way he said it made Willow's eyes sting with unexpected tears. No one had ever stood up for her before. No one had ever treated her as if she had value beyond what she could provide as a wife or daughter. Thank you, she said simply. Kieran nodded, then glanced at the baby in Rosa's arms. Now, I believe Mrs. Flores has prepared a proper breakfast, and these little ones probably need feeding too. As they moved toward the kitchen, Willow felt a cautious hope unfurling within her. For the first time, she could imagine a future different from the one her father had planned, a future where she and the twins might know safety and perhaps even happiness. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as Willow settled into life at the Double W. True to his word, Kieran set her to work on the ranch books, which were in a state of disarray that would have horrified any accountant. Willow, who had secretly managed her father's farm accounts when he was too drunk to do so, found the work challenging but satisfying. The twins thrived in the ranch environment. Rosa doted on them as if they were her own grandchildren, and even the rough cowboys who worked for Kieran would stop by the house to make faces at the babies and bring them little carved wooden toys. Kieran himself was a revelation. He ran his ranch with firm authority, but treated his workers with respect and fairness. He seemed to be everywhere, at once mending fences, breaking horses, negotiating cattle sales, and still finding time to sit on the porch in the evenings to play with Emma and Elijah. You're good with them, Willow observed one evening as Kieran bounced Elijah on his knee, the baby's laughter filling the air like music. They make it easy, Kieran replied, smiling as Elijah grabbed at his bandana. They're happy babies. They weren't always, Willow admitted. At my father's, they cried constantly. I think they sensed the tension. Kieran nodded, his expression serious. Children know more than we give them credit for. They feel the emotions around them. And what do they feel here? Willow asked, genuinely curious. Kieran looked at her, his blue eyes warm in the fading light. Safety, acceptance, maybe even love. The word hung between them, charged with meaning beyond its application to the twins. Willow felt her cheeks warm and looked away, focusing on Emma, who was attempting to roll over on the blanket spread before them. "She's getting stronger," Kieran noted, mercifully changing the subject. "She'll be crawling before you know it." "And then walking," Willow said with a mixture of pride and trepidation. "I'm not sure the ranch house is ready for 2 mobile babies," Kieran laughed. "Miguel can build some gates for the stairs and hearth. We'll manage." The casual way he included himself in the future of her, and the twins made Willow's heart beat faster. In the weeks since her arrival, she had found herself drawn to the quiet rancher in ways that both thrilled and frightened her. He was everything her father was not: kind, respectful, gentle, despite his obvious strength. And she had caught him looking at her when he thought she wouldn't notice, his gaze lingering on her face or following her movements across a room. But she had also seen the wariness in his eyes when he spoke of his past, the careful distance he maintained even as he welcomed her into his home. Kieran Walsh had his own ghosts, and Willow was beginning to think they had something to do with the fact that a man his age lived alone on a prosperous ranch, unattached and seemingly content to remain so. "Winter will be here soon," Kieran said, breaking into her thoughts. "The first snow usually comes by mid-November." "Will it be very cold?" Willow asked, thinking of the twins. "Cold enough, but the house is well insulated and we keep plenty of firewood stacked. The barn and bunkhouse too." He glanced at her. "You've never spent a winter in Montana." Willow shook her head. "We moved here from Kansas last spring. My father thought there was more opportunity for expanding his farm. And was there, for the farm, perhaps. For me and Martha, it was just another place where we existed solely to serve his ambitions." Willow sighed. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound bitter." "You have every right to your feelings," Kieran said quietly. "What your father did, what he's still trying to do, is wrong." There had been no further visits from the Matthews men, but Willow had heard from Rosa, who heard from the butcher in town, who heard from the blacksmith, that Abraham Matthews was telling anyone who would listen that his daughter had been bewitched by Kieran Walsh and stolen away, along with valuable property in the form of his grandchildren. "Some believe him," Rosa had reported grimly, "but many do not. Your father's reputation precedes him, and Mr. Walsh is well respected in Silver Creek." Still, Willow worried. Her father was not a man to forgive or forget a perceived slight, and in his mind her escape was nothing short of betrayal. "What will happen when winter comes?" she asked Kieran now. "Will my father give up?" Kieran considered the question, bouncing Elijah gently when the baby fussed. "The snow will make travel difficult, which works in our favor. But Abraham Matthews strikes me as a man who nurses grudges. He may wait until spring, but I doubt he'll simply forget." "Then what do we do?" Willow asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. "We prepare," Kieran said simply. "And we live our lives in the meantime. These little ones deserve a childhood free from fear, and you deserve a chance to build a life of your own choosing." The conviction in his voice warmed Willow like a physical touch. "Thank you for believing that." "It's not a matter of belief," Kieran said, his eyes serious as they met hers. "It's a matter of right and wrong, and forcing a woman to marry against her will, taking children from the only mother they've known, that's wrong by any measure." A cry from Emma interrupted them, and Willow moved to pick her up. "Someone's hungry," she said, settling the baby in her arms, "and her brother will be too once he notices she's eating." As if on cue, Elijah began to fuss, reaching toward his sister. Kieran laughed and handed him to Willow. "I'll let you tend to them. I need to check on a heifer that's due to calve tonight anyway." He stood, brushing off his pants, then hesitated. Willow, yes, I'm glad you're here. All three of you. Before she could respond, he was gone, striding toward the barn with long, purposeful steps. Willow watched him go, the twins warm against her chest, and felt something unfamiliar bloom within her, something that felt dangerously like hope. The first snow came in early November, just as Kieran had predicted. Willow woke to a world transformed, the familiar landscape of the ranch now covered in a blanket of pristine white. The twins, now 7 months old, stared in wonder from the window as she held them up to see. "Snow," she told them, though they were too young to understand. "Isn't it beautiful?" "Their first snow," Kieran said from the doorway, making Willow turn in surprise. He was dressed for the outdoors, a heavy coat over his usual attire and a woolen scarf wrapped around his neck. "Sorry, I didn't mean to startle you. The door was open." "It's fine," Willow said, smiling. "We were just admiring the view." Kieran crossed to stand beside them at the window, close enough that Willow could smell the scent of pine and leather that seemed to cling to him. "It came earlier than usual this year, a good 6 inches overnight. Is that a problem for the ranch?" Willow asked, aware of how much she still had to learn about the rhythms of ranch life. "Not yet. We moved the cattle to the lower pastures last week, and they've got good shelter in the South Grove. If it keeps up, though, we might have to bring some of the weaker ones into the barn." He tickled Elijah under the chin, earning a gummy smile. "You two picked a good day to stay indoors." "As if they had a choice," Willow laughed. "Though I'm sure they'd love to explore if they could. Maybe not in this cold, but come spring, they'll be crawling all over the place." Kieran's gaze was warm as it moved from the twins to Willow's face. "You look rested this morning," Willow nodded. "They slept through the night for the first time. A miracle, truly." "A milestone," Kieran corrected. "The first of many." He stepped back, seeming to remember himself. "I came to tell you that Miguel and I are riding into town for supplies before the snow gets any deeper." "Is there anything you need?" Willow thought for a moment. "Fabric, if Mr. Harper has any at the general store. I want to make warmer clothes for the twins." "I'll see what I can find," Kieran promised. "We should be back by supper, but if the snow picks up, we might stay in town overnight." The thought of Kieran being away, even for a night, sent an unexpected pang through Willow. She had grown accustomed to his presence, to their quiet conversations in the evenings, to the way he seemed to anticipate her needs before she voiced them. "Be careful," she said, trying to keep her tone light. The twins would miss their favorite playmate. Something flickered in Kieran's eyes, a warmth that made Willow's breath catch. "Only the twins." Before she could formulate a response, Rosa appeared in the doorway, flour dusting her apron. "Mr. Walsh, Miguel is waiting with the horses." "And Señorita, the bread is ready for kneading when you have a moment." The moment broken, Kieran nodded to both women and headed for the door. "I'll bring back that fabric," he called over his shoulder, "and maybe some candy for Christmas." "It's only November," Willow called back, laughing. "Never too early to plan for Christmas," he replied with a wink before disappearing down the hallway. Rosa looked from Willow to the empty doorway, her expression knowing. "He is a good man, our Mr. Walsh." "Yes," Willow agreed softly. "He is." The older woman nodded, satisfied. "The bread will not knead itself, and these little ones look ready for their morning feed. Come, I will help you settle them." As the day progressed, the snow continued to fall, soft and steady. By mid-afternoon, Willow found herself watching the window, though she knew it was too early for Kieran and Miguel to return. The twins napped in their cradle by the fire, and Rosa was in the kitchen preparing a stew for dinner. The knock at the door came suddenly, startling Willow from her thoughts. Rosa appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Are they back so soon?" Kieran would not knock, Willow said, a sense of unease washing over her. "And neither would Miguel." Rosa's face hardened. "Stay with the babies, I will answer it." "No," Willow said, rising from her chair. "I'll go." Heart pounding, she approached the door, wishing suddenly that she had access to the rifle Kieran kept mounted above the fireplace. Taking a deep breath, she pulled the door open. Standing on the porch, snow dusting his hat and shoulders, was a young man she didn't recognize. He was thin and nervous-looking, shifting from foot to foot as he clutched an envelope in gloved hands. "Miss Matthews?" he asked, his voice cracking slightly. "Yes," Willow acknowledged cautiously. "I'm Timothy Harper from the general store in town. My pa asked me to deliver this to you." He thrust the envelope toward her. "It's from Judge Wilson in Helena." Willow took the envelope, her fingers numb with more than cold. "Thank you." The boy nodded, then glanced nervously over his shoulder at the falling snow. "I'd best get back before it gets worse. Pa says there's a proper blizzard coming." As the boy mounted his horse and rode away, Willow closed the door and stared at the envelope in her hands. The official seal of the territorial court was stamped in red wax on the back. "What is it?" Rosa asked, coming to stand beside her. "I don't know," Willow admitted, breaking the seal with trembling fingers. She unfolded the paper inside and read the formal legal language, her heart sinking with each word. "My father has filed a petition with the court," she said, her voice sounding distant to her own ears. "He claims I am mentally unfit to care for the twins, and that they are his legal wards since my sister died intestate. He's seeking an order for their return and—" She swallowed hard. "And for me to be remanded to his custody until I can be evaluated by a doctor of his choosing." Rosa made the sign of the cross. "That evil man, he cannot do this." "According to this, he can," Willow said, fighting against the panic rising in her throat. "Judge Wilson has ordered a hearing in Helena on December 15th. But that is impossible." "The snow, the distance. I think that's exactly what my father is counting on," Willow said bitterly. "If I don't appear, the judge will rule in his favor by default." Rosa took the paper from Willow's shaking hands and read it herself, her lips moving as she translated the legal terms in her mind. "This is not right. Mr. Walsh will know what to do." "If he can get back through the snow," Willow said, moving to the window. The white landscape outside was now almost completely obscured by the thickening snowfall. "And if he can't, I'll have to figure it out myself." She looked over at the twins, sleeping peacefully by the fire, unaware of the storm, both literal and figurative, that threatened their future. "I won't let him take them, Rosa. I promised Martha I would keep them safe." Rosa squeezed her arm. "And you will. You are stronger than you know, Señorita, and you are not alone." The rest of the day passed in a haze of worry. By sunset, the snow was falling so heavily that Willow could barely see the barn from the house. There was no sign of Kieran or Miguel, and she tried to take comfort in the knowledge that they had likely stayed in town, as Kieran had suggested they might. She went through the motions of caring for the twins, feeding them, bathing them, and singing them to sleep with the lullabies her mother had once sung to her. All the while, her mind raced, trying to devise a plan. If she could get to Helena for the hearing, perhaps she could convince the judge that her father's claims were false. But traveling across Montana in December with 2 babies would be dangerous, if not impossible. And if she lost the case, her father would take the twins, and she would be placed under his control once more, or worse, forced to marry Harold Pinkerton. The thought made her physically ill. She had tasted freedom now, had experienced what it meant to be treated with respect and kindness. She could not go back. When the twins were finally asleep, Willow sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. Rosa had retired to her cabin hours ago, after extracting a promise from Willow that she would try to rest. The wind howled around the eaves of the house, and the fire popped and crackled in the hearth. Willow stared into the flames, remembering another night by another fire when she had whispered her plan to flee to her sister's grave. "I won't fail them, Martha," she murmured. "I won't fail you." The sound of the door opening made her jump to her feet, heart racing. Kieran stood in the entrance, snow covering his coat and hat, his face red from the cold. "Kieran," Willow rushed toward him. "I was worried you wouldn't make it back." "Almost didn't," he admitted, stamping his boots to remove the snow. "Miguel stayed in town with his cousin. The road's nearly impassable now." "Then how did you—" "I know these lands better than any road," Kieran said, removing his coat and hanging it by the door. "And I didn't like the thought of you and the twins alone with this storm coming." The simple admission warmed Willow more than the fire ever could. "Thank you." Kieran looked at her more closely, noting her tense posture and the shadows under her eyes. "What's happened?" Wordlessly, Willow handed him the letter from the court. He read it quickly, his expression darkening with each line. "When did this arrive?" "This afternoon. A boy from the general store delivered it." Kieran cursed under his breath, a rare display of anger that testified to the seriousness of the situation. "Your father doesn't waste time." "What can I do?" Willow asked, her voice small. "If I don't appear at the hearing, you'll appear," Kieran said firmly. "We'll leave as soon as the storm passes. Helena is only 3 days' ride in good weather." "With 2 babies?" Willow asked incredulously. "In December. We'll take the wagon. I'll have Miguel build a cover for it, line it with blankets and furs. Rosa can come too to help with the twins." Kieran's mind was clearly racing ahead, formulating plans. "We'll need to find a lawyer in Helena who isn't in your father's pocket." "Kieran," Willow interrupted his planning. "Why are you doing this? You've already done so much for us. This could cost you more than just time and effort." "My father has influence." Kieran looked at her then, really looked at her, his blue eyes intense in the firelight. "Do you really not know, Willow?" She shook her head, afraid to hope, afraid to name the feeling that had been growing between them over the past weeks. Kieran stepped closer, close enough that she could see the snowflakes melting in his beard, could feel the cold radiating from his clothes. "I'm doing this because in the short time you've been here, you and those babies have become the most important people in my life." Willow's breath caught. "Kieran, let me finish," he said gently. "I've lived alone for a long time. I told myself it was by choice, that I was better off that way. But then you arrived with your courage and your determination and those 2 little ones who depend on you, and suddenly this house felt like a home again." He reached out, his calloused fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face with infinite tenderness. "I don't expect anything from you, Willow. You came here seeking safety and freedom, and that's what you'll have, for as long as you want it. But I need you to know that I will fight for you and the twins with everything I have, not because I feel obligated, but because I care for you, deeply." Tears filled Willow's eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. "I care for you too," she whispered. "More than I thought possible after such a short time." Kieran's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb gently wiping away a tear. "Then we'll face this together. Your father, the court, whatever comes next, together." The promise in that single word filled Willow with a courage she hadn't known she possessed. Standing on tiptoe, she pressed her lips to his in a kiss that spoke of hope and possibility, and a future she was only beginning to imagine. When they finally parted, Kieran rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her face. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow we plan." Willow nodded, reluctant to break the moment but knowing he was right. "Good night, Kieran." "Good night, Willow," he replied, the tenderness in his voice wrapping around her like a promise. As she climbed the stairs to her room where the twins slept peacefully in their cradle, Willow felt a new resolve settling in her bones. Her father had underestimated her once when she fled his farm in the dead of night. He was underestimating her again if he thought she would surrender without a fight. And this time, she wasn't fighting alone. The blizzard raged for 3 days, confining them to the house and making any travel impossible. During that time, Kieran and Willow developed their plan for the journey to Helena and the court hearing. They pored over maps, calculated travel times, and discussed legal strategies based on the limited knowledge they had. Judge Wilson has a reputation for being fair but traditional, Kieran told her as they sat at the kitchen table, the twins playing on a blanket nearby. He'll be inclined to side with your father on the basis of property rights and patriarchal authority. The twins aren't property, Willow said fiercely. And I'm not a child to be controlled by my father. I'm a grown woman. I know that, Kieran said, covering her hand with his. But the law still gives fathers and husbands considerable power over women and children. We need to focus on what will sway the judge in our favor, which is the welfare of the children. If we can prove that you're providing a stable, loving home for them, and that returning them to your father would be harmful, we might stand a chance. Willow nodded, thinking. Martha's last letter. Before she died, she wrote to me, asking me to care for her babies if anything happened to her. I brought it with me when I fled. Kieran's eyes lit up. That could be crucial. It's evidence of your sister's wishes. But will it be enough? Willow asked, the doubt creeping back in. My father can be very convincing when he wants to be. We'll gather testimonials from people in town who know your father's reputation, and Rosa and Miguel will testify to the care you've given the twins since coming here. Kieran squeezed her hand. We have truth on our side, Willow. She wished she could share his optimism, but years of living under her father's thumb had taught her that truth often mattered less than power and influence. On the 4th day, the storm finally broke, leaving behind a transformed landscape of pristine white drifts and crystal-clear blue skies. Kieran immediately set to work with Miguel, preparing the wagon for their journey. They built a wooden frame over the bed and covered it with canvas, creating a shelter that would protect against wind and snow. Inside, they lined the floor with hay and furs, creating a nest-like space where Willow and the twins could travel in relative comfort. We'll leave at first light tomorrow, Kieran told Willow as they stood in the barn, inspecting the finished wagon. If the weather holds, we should reach Helena with a day to spare before the hearing. Willow ran her hand along the sturdy wooden frame. You've thought of everything. I try to, Kieran said with a small smile, but there are always unknowns when traveling in winter. We'll need to be prepared for anything. That evening, as they sat before the fire after the twins were asleep, Willow felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever happened in Helena, she had done everything in her power to protect her sister's children, and she was no longer alone in the fight. What are you thinking? Kieran asked, noticing her distant expression. That I'm grateful, she replied honestly. For you, for this place, for the chance to give Emma and Elijah a life different from the one I had. Kieran's gaze was warm as it held hers across the space between their chairs. Since that first kiss during the blizzard, there had been no further physical demonstrations of affection between them, but something had shifted in their relationship. A silent understanding, a promise of more when the time was right. Whatever happens in Helena, Kieran said, echoing her thoughts, this is your home now, all of you. Willow smiled, the fear that had been her constant companion since receiving the court summons finally receding. I believe you. The journey to Helena began before dawn the next day. The temperature had dropped overnight, making the snow crunch beneath the wagon wheels as they set out. Willow sat in the covered portion of the wagon with the twins bundled in layers of blankets, while Rosa rode beside her, ready to help with the babies. Kieran drove the team, with Miguel riding alongside on horseback. Progress was slow but steady. The main road had been partially cleared by other travelers, making the going easier than Kieran had feared. They stopped frequently to feed and change the twins, who seemed to view the journey as a grand adventure, cooing and babbling at the new sights and sounds. By nightfall, they had covered nearly 20 miles. They made camp in a small clearing, where Miguel built a roaring fire while Kieran set up a tent for Willow, Rosa, and the twins. The night was bitterly cold, but huddled together under mounds of blankets, they stayed warm enough. The second day brought new challenges as they encountered a section of road that had been washed out by melting snow. It took hours to find an alternate route, putting them behind schedule. Kieran's face grew increasingly concerned as he calculated distances and times in his head. "We'll make it," Willow assured him as they stopped to rest the horses. "And if we're late, we'll explain the circumstances." Kieran nodded, though the worry didn't leave his eyes. "Your father will be there on time with his lawyer and his witnesses. We need to be too." The third day dawned clear but even colder. Emma had developed a slight cough during the night, making Willow fret over her. "Perhaps we should stop, find shelter until she's better." "We can't," Kieran said, his voice gentle but firm. "If we miss that hearing, your father wins by default." Rosa, who had been examining the baby, looked up. "The little one will be fine. I have herbs that will ease her breathing, and see, her brother keeps her spirits up." It was true. Elijah was crawling over the blankets to his sister, patting her face with chubby hands until she giggled despite her discomfort. They pushed on, traveling well into the night. By the time they reached the outskirts of Helena, it was past midnight and all of them were exhausted. They found rooms at a small hotel on the edge of town, the proprietor grumbling about the late hour but softening when he saw the twins. "Court's just 3 blocks down," he told them as he handed over the keys. "Opens at 9 sharp." Willow barely slept that night, her mind racing with all the things that could go wrong. What if the judge didn't believe her? What if her father had brought false witnesses? What if Harold Pinkerton was there, ready to claim her as his promised bride? Morning came too quickly. Kieran had gone out at dawn and returned with a surprise, a young lawyer named David Miller, who specialized in family law. "Mr. Miller has agreed to represent you," Kieran explained as the young man shook Willow's hand. "He's familiar with Judge Wilson and knows how to present our case effectively." Miller, who couldn't have been more than 30, had kind eyes and a determined set to his jaw. "Mr. Walsh has explained your situation, Miss Matthews. Rest assured, I will do everything in my power to ensure those children remain in your care." With Rosa's help, Willow dressed the twins in their best clothes outfits she had sewn herself during the evenings at the ranch. She wore the dress Kieran had purchased for her in town before the blizzard, a simple but elegant garment of deep blue wool that made her eyes appear almost violet. "You look beautiful," Kieran said when she emerged from her room, the twins in her arms. He himself was dressed in his finest clothes, a dark suit that transformed him from rugged rancher to respectable businessman. "So do you," Willow replied with a small smile. "I hardly recognized you without dust on your hat," Kieran laughed, the sound easing some of the tension that had built between them. "Ready?" Willow took a deep breath, looking down at the twins and then back at the man who had risked so much to help her. "Yes, I'm ready." The courthouse was a grand stone building in the center of Helena, its imposing facade a stark reminder of the power and authority they were about to face. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of polish and paper, the hushed voices of clerks and lawyers creating a constant murmur. They found the courtroom easily enough, and Willow's heart sank when she saw her father already seated at one of the tables, Harold Pinkerton beside him. Abraham Matthews looked older than she remembered, his face more lined, his shoulders slightly stooped. But the hard glint in his eyes was unchanged as he spotted her and the twins. "Ignore him," Kieran murmured, his hand at the small of her back guiding her to the opposite table, where Miller was arranging his papers. Judge Wilson entered a few minutes later, a tall man with a shock of white hair and piercing eyes that missed nothing as they surveyed the courtroom. "All rise," the bailiff called, and everyone stood as the judge took his seat. The proceedings began with Abraham's lawyer presenting his case. He painted Willow as a disturbed young woman who had stolen her father's grandchildren out of spite and delusion. He described Abraham as a loving grandfather, concerned only for the welfare of his daughter and the twins. "Furthermore," the lawyer continued, "Miss Matthews has been living in sin with Mr. Walsh, a man of questionable character, exposing these innocent children to moral corruption." Willow felt Kieran stiffen beside her, but he remained silent, his face impassive. When it was Miller's turn to speak, he rose with quiet confidence. "Your Honor, I would like to begin by presenting a letter written by Martha Matthews Taylor, the mother of these children, shortly before her death." He handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. In it, she explicitly asks her sister Willow to care for her children should anything happen to her. Judge Wilson read the letter, his expression unchanged. "Continue, Mr. Miller." "I would also like to present testimonials from citizens of Silver Creek, attesting to both the character of Miss Matthews and the reputation of her father." Miller handed over several more papers. These include statements from the town doctor, the schoolteacher, and the minister, all of whom have observed Abraham Matthews's treatment of his daughters and found it wanting. Abraham stood abruptly. "This is slander. These people know nothing of my family matters. Sit down, Mr. Matthews," Judge Wilson ordered sternly. "You'll have your chance to speak." The hearing continued with witnesses called on both sides. Rosa testified to Willow's devotion to the twins, describing how she had fled in the night to protect them from being sent to an orphanage. Miguel spoke of the safe, loving environment at the Double W Ranch, where the babies were thriving. Abraham's witnesses included Harold Pinkerton, who claimed that Willow had promised to marry him, and then fled, taking the twins to deny him his rightful family. His testimony made Willow's skin crawl, especially when he described how he would raise the children properly, with discipline and respect for their elders. Finally, Judge Wilson called Willow herself to testify. With trembling legs but a steady voice, she approached the witness stand, swore the oath, and began to tell her story. She spoke of her sister's death, of her father's plan to send the babies away, of her decision to flee rather than allow them to be separated from the only mother they had known. She described the life they had built at the Double W, the routine and stability, the love and care. "And what of your relationship with Mr. Walsh?" the judge asked, his tone neutral. Willow glanced at Kieran, drawing strength from his steady gaze. "Mr. Walsh offered us shelter when we had nowhere else to go. He provided employment, allowing me to support the twins independently. He has shown them kindness and been a positive male influence in their lives." She paused, then added simply, "He has been a friend when we needed one most." Abraham's lawyer stood. "Is that all he has been, Miss Matthews? A friend?" The townspeople of Silver Creek seemed to believe otherwise. Willow felt heat rise to her cheeks, but met the lawyer's gaze directly. "Mr. Walsh has behaved with perfect propriety toward me at all times." If the townspeople believe otherwise, it speaks more to their inclination for gossip than to any impropriety on our part." A faint murmur ran through the courtroom, and Judge Wilson called for order. "I think I've heard enough," he said, gathering his papers. "I will retire to consider my decision. Court will reconvene in 1 hour." The wait was excruciating. Willow paced the hallway outside the courtroom, the twins growing fussy in Rosa's arms. Kieran stood by the window, his back straight, his expression unreadable. "What are you thinking?" Willow asked, coming to stand beside him. "That you were magnificent in there," he replied, his voice low, "brave and honest and clear-headed." "I was terrified," she admitted. "I still am." Kieran turned to face her fully. "Whatever happens, Willow, remember what I told you. You have a home with me for as long as you want it. We'll find a way, even if all parties in the Matthews case. Please return to the courtroom," a clerk called, interrupting Kieran's promise. They filed back in, Willow now holding both twins, one on each hip. They had sensed the tension and were unusually quiet, their small faces solemn as they looked around the crowded room. Judge Wilson entered, his face giving away nothing as he took his seat. "In the matter of the guardianship of Emma and Elijah Taylor," he began, his voice formal, "I have considered the evidence presented by both parties. I have read the letter from Martha Matthews Taylor expressing her wishes for her children's care. I have heard testimony regarding the character and capabilities of both Abraham Matthews and Willow Matthews." He paused, looking directly at Willow and the twins. "The welfare of these children is my primary concern. They have already lost their mother and been abandoned by their father. Stability and love are what they need most now." Willow held her breath, feeling Kieran's solid presence beside her. "It is therefore my judgment that guardianship of Emma and Elijah Taylor be granted to their aunt, Willow Matthews, who has demonstrated her commitment to their care and well-being." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Abraham Matthews stood, his face contorted with rage. "This is an outrage. They are my grandchildren." "Sit down, Mr. Matthews," the judge ordered sharply. "I have not finished." He waited until Abraham complied before continuing. "While I grant guardianship to Miss Matthews, I am concerned about the living arrangements described. It is not appropriate for a single woman with 2 young children to reside in the home of an unmarried man, regardless of the propriety of their relationship." Willow's heart sank. After all this, would she be forced to leave the W? "Therefore," Judge Wilson continued, "I am giving Miss Matthews 60 days to secure appropriate independent housing for herself and the children, or to regularize her living situation through marriage." Kieran stepped forward. "Your Honor, if I may," the judge nodded, curiosity in his eyes. "I had intended to speak with Miss Matthews privately about this matter, but perhaps now is as good a time as any." Kieran turned to face Willow, taking both her hands in his. "Willow Matthews, from the moment you arrived at my ranch with these 2 precious children, you have brought light and life to a place that had known too little of either. I have grown to love not only you but Emma and Elijah as well. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, allowing me to be a father to these children and a husband to you?" The courtroom fell silent. Willow stared at Kieran, tears filling her eyes. She knew this was partly motivated by the judge's ruling, a practical solution to their dilemma. But the love in Kieran's eyes was real as the feelings that had been growing in her own heart. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, I will marry you." A cheer went up from Rosa and Miguel while Abraham Matthews stormed from the courtroom, Harold Pinkerton trailing in his wake. Judge Wilson allowed himself a small smile. "Well, that resolves that issue," he said dryly. "The marriage should take place within the 60-day period. Court is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, with the twins babbling happily in Rosa's arms, Willow turned to Kieran. "Did you mean it? Or was it just to satisfy the judge?" Kieran's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle but sure. "I have never meant anything more in my life. I love you, Willow Matthews. I've been falling in love with you since the night you appeared on my land with 2 babies and more courage than anyone I've ever known." Willow's heart felt too full for words. Instead, she rose on her tiptoes and kissed him, pouring all her feelings into the gesture. When they finally parted, both breathing a little harder, the world around them seemed brighter somehow, full of possibility. "Let's go home," Kieran said, his arm sliding around her waist. "Our home." The journey back to the Double W was considerably lighter in spirit than the journey to Helena had been. The twins, sensing the happiness around them, were at their most charming, cooing and smiling at everyone they encountered. Even the weather cooperated, with clear skies and milder temperatures making travel easier. They reached the ranch 5 days later, the familiar silhouette of the house against the horizon filling Willow with a sense of homecoming she had never experienced before. This was where she belonged, where they all belonged. The wedding took place 2 weeks later, a simple ceremony in the Silver Creek Church with Rosa and Miguel as witnesses and the twins as honorary attendants, carried down the aisle by Mr. and Mrs. Flores. The town turned out in force, curious to see the woman who had stood up to Abraham Matthews and won, and the rancher who had taken in a ready-made family. Willow wore a dress of ivory satin that Rosa had helped her sew, with lace from a bolt of fabric Kieran had brought back from Helena. Kieran wore his best suit, his hair freshly trimmed, his face shining with pride as he watched his bride approach. The minister's words were traditional but heartfelt, speaking of love and commitment, of building a family on a foundation of respect and kindness. When it came time for the vows, Kieran took Willow's hands in his voice steady and sure. "I, Kieran Walsh, take you, Willow Matthews, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love, honor, and cherish you, to be a father to Emma and Elijah, to build a home and a life with you filled with laughter and joy. I will stand beside you in good times and bad, in sickness and in health from this day forward, until death parts us." Tears glistened in Willow's eyes as she repeated her own vows, her voice growing stronger with each word. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Kieran's kiss was both tender and passionate, a promise of all that was to come. The celebration afterward at the Double W Ranch lasted well into the night, with food and music and dancing. The twins were passed from one admiring guest to another, their happy babbling a constant soundtrack to the festivities. "They won't remember this day," Kieran said as he and Willow watched Rosa dance with Elijah while Miguel bounced Emma on his knee, "but we'll tell them the story." "What story is that?" Willow asked, leaning against her husband's solid warmth. "The story of how their brave mother rescued them from a life without love," Kieran said, his arm tightening around her waist. "How she crossed miles in the dark, risking everything to give them a chance at happiness. How she found a home where they could grow and thrive. And how she found a man who loved them all," Willow added softly. "A man who said, 'You're free now, stay,' and meant it with his whole heart." Kieran turned to face her, his blue eyes intense in the lamplight. "I meant every word, Willow Walsh, every single one." As winter gave way to spring and spring to summer, the Double W Ranch flourished under the care of its expanded family. Kieran's cattle business thrived, aided by Willow's skilled management of the books. The twins grew stronger and more adventurous by the day, crawling and then walking, exploring their world with boundless curiosity. Abraham Matthews made one final attempt to interfere, filing another petition with the court claiming that the marriage was a sham. Judge Wilson dismissed it without a hearing, citing the obvious devotion between Kieran and Willow and the thriving condition of the children. In September, as the aspen leaves turned gold in the mountains, Willow shared news of her own. She was expecting a child, due in the spring. Kieran's joy was boundless, matched only by the excitement of Rosa and Miguel, who declared themselves ready for another grandchild to spoil. The twins, now 15 months old and toddling everywhere, seemed to understand that something wonderful was happening. They patted Willow's still flat stomach with gentle hands, Elijah solemnly saying "baby" in his newly acquired vocabulary. On Christmas Eve, as snow fell gently outside the windows of the ranch house, the family gathered around the tree Kieran had cut from the north pasture. The twins, in matching nightgowns sewn by Willow, exclaimed over the wooden toys Kieran had carved for them and the sweets Rosa had baked. Later, with the children asleep and the house quiet except for the crackling of the fire, Kieran and Willow sat together on the sofa, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "Happy?" he asked, his hand moving to gently touch the small swell of her stomach where their child grew. "More than I ever thought possible," Willow replied honestly. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is my life now." Kieran pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Believe it. You earned it, Willow. You fought for it." She thought back to that night over a year ago when she had fled her father's farm with 2 babies and nothing but determination to guide her. How terrified she had been, how uncertain of the future. And how everything had changed when a tall rancher on a dark horse had found her in the night and offered her freedom. "We all fought for it," she corrected gently, "and we'll keep fighting if we need to. But for now—" She turned in his arms, her lips finding his in a kiss that spoke of love and gratitude and a future bright with promise. "For now, we're home, all of us, together." Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the land in a blanket of white that would protect it until spring came again, bringing new life and new beginnings to the Double W Ranch and the family that called it home.